Everyone knows that justice doesn't always go to the right person. Sometimes it goes to the person with more power. That morning, the courtroom was packed. The air was thick with tension, the light shining through the high windows, casting long, dark shadows on the faces of those waiting. At the center of the storm was a woman, Monica Jackson. She stood there, unshaken, unbowed, even though today she was the defendant. A former Navy officer, one of America's few Navy SEALs, now on the stand, accused of assaulting a police officer during an arrest that she knew was a trap. On the opposite side was the man who had put her in this situation, Officer John Carter. His police uniform was perfectly straight. His face was upright and calm. But Monica knew, beneath that dignified exterior, there was a devil in human form. Someone who bends the truth, manipulates the system to protect herself. The jury looked at her, some already deciding who was guilty. No one spoke, but Monica could sense it. They were not on her side. Carter began his testimony. His voice was strong, each sentence smooth, as if it had been choreographed. That night, the defendant resisted me, grabbed my arm, tried to grab the weapon. He paused, scanning the room, as if to etch the image of a dangerous woman into everyone's mind. Monica clenched her fists under the table. She knew the truth, but she also knew that in this room, the truth did not always have a voice. She had fought on the battlefield, but this was a different war. A war where the strong were not those with guns, but those with the power to manipulate the law. But then, the door to the courtroom opened. A man walked in. Daniel Reeves, a former police officer. His eyes were sharp, and most importantly, he carried the truth. "Officer Carter," he said, looking straight at the man sitting in the witness chair, his voice slow but full of weight. "Do you really want to tell the whole story? Or do you want me to do it for you?" The courtroom fell silent. Monica saw Carter's face pale in an instant. She knew right then that his wall of lies was starting to crumble. Will the truth be buried or revealed? Whose side will justice be on? If you want to know what happens next, subscribe to Black Footprints now. Monica Jackson's journey to justice has only just begun. The sky was gray that morning, as if it were waiting for a verdict. The faint light that filtered through the high windows of the courtroom cast a gloomy shadow over the faces of those present. The air was so heavy and tense that even a sharp breath could shatter the silence. The seats were packed, and eyes were fixed on the woman standing in the defendant's position, Monica Jackson. Monica was no ordinary person. She did not tremble or appear confused like the other defendants. With a strong physique, sharp eyes, and a proud straight back, she stood there as if this were not a trial but a battlefield that she had to win. Monica was one of America's few Navy SEALs, a former Navy officer with a formidable record. She had spent her youth on a battlefield where justice was not decided by lies, but by action, courage, and truth. But today, the truth was being twisted by a man sitting across the table, Officer John Carter. A white police officer, Carter appeared to be a straight-laced, unwrinkled uniform, but there was a darkness behind it that Monica knew better than anyone. Carter had charged her with assault and obstruction, a charge that could destroy her reputation and her life. His testimony was carefully crafted, each sentence ringing as if it were the undeniable truth. But Monica knew the truth lay not in Carter's words, but in the secrets he was trying to keep hidden. She could feel the eyes of the jury, some curious, some skeptical, some already deciding who was guilty. She knew the statistics. She knew that in an American courtroom, a black woman like herself would always have to fight twice as hard to be heard. But that didn't stop her. Monica's lawyer, a calm, middle-aged man, stood up and began his defense. But Monica wasn't about to let her fate depend on someone else's words. She was going to tell the truth. And when she opened her mouth, her deep voice rang out, strong as a sharp knife cutting through the stuffiness of the courtroom. "Officer Carter," she said, her eyes never leaving the man across from her, "you said I attacked you without reason. But I think it's time we tell the whole story. Not your version. The truth." The room fell silent. Everyone waited for what would come next. And Monica knew she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for justice, justice that couldn't be hidden forever. In the hushed courtroom, Officer John Carter took the stand. With his neatly pressed uniform, badge gleaming on his chest, he looked like the epitome of a vigilante, a man dedicated to his job, doing his duty to protect the community. But Monica knew better. She stared at Carter's face, his eyes sharp, but with a familiar arrogance, one she had grown accustomed to seeing from men like him in the military. Carter cleared his throat, then began his statement with conviction. That evening, I was on my routine patrol when I noticed the defendant, Monica Jackson, behaving suspiciously. When I approached her and asked for her papers, she became defiant, refused to cooperate, and began to act aggressively. She yanked my arm, pushed me, and tried to grab my weapon. He paused, his eyes scanning the jury to emphasize the seriousness of the story. From my many years of experience, I can say this. Her behavior is extremely dangerous. She is a threat to my safety and the safety of those around her. A murmur rose in the room. A few nodded, as if they believed Carter. An older woman shook her head, her lips pressed together. Carter had played his cards right, portraying the image of a police officer doing his job, just trying to stop an aggressive woman before things got worse. Monica remained still, not a muscle in her face twitching. But inside her chest, her heart was pounding. Not with anxiety, but with anger. Not with fear, but with injustice. She knew people like Carter, people who believed that by wearing a uniform, they could twist the truth and make themselves look like victims. When it was her turn, Monica stepped forward, standing tall. She didn't need to fabricate or manipulate. She just needed to tell the truth. That night, she began, her voice low and clear. I was stopped on the side of the road to check my map. I had just finished a long day on my way home. When Officer Carter asked for my papers, I asked him why he had stopped me. That didn't mean I was being confrontational. I didn't yell. I didn't get aggressive. I was just asking a simple question, a legitimate right of any citizen. Monica looked straight at the jury. She didn't duck. She didn't lower her voice. But it seemed to Officer Carter that a black woman questioning her rights meant she had to be a threat. The courtroom was silent. Every eye was on Monica, waiting for her to continue. But she didn't need to say much. She let the words sink in, letting everyone in the room ponder what they meant. On the other side, Carter clenched his jaw. She could see his hands clenching. It was the sign of someone losing control. And Monica knew she had just laid the first brick to break down the wall of lies Carter had built. The air in the courtroom seemed frozen. Monica's words still hung in the air, like a sharp knife cutting through the veil of lies that Officer Carter had tried to construct. But just as the tension reached its peak, the door at the back of the room suddenly opened. A man entered. He was not a member of the jury, nor an official in the courtroom. He was tall, his suit slightly wrinkled, his face marked by time and fatigue. But there was one thing that was unmistakable, his eyes, sharp and determined. Monica's attorney turned, a smile playing on his lips. "Your Honor, we have an additional witness." Carter, who had been calm all this time, stiffened as the man stepped onto the stand. Monica recognized the change. A liar fears only one thing, the truth. The judge nodded, signaling for the witness to be sworn in. "Identify yourself." The man cleared his throat, his eyes flicked to Carter, and then said clearly, "I'm Daniel Reeves, former police officer. I worked with Officer Carter many years ago." A murmur rose from the room. Monica watched Carter closely, noting the twitching of every muscle in his face. She had been in combat long enough to know that when a person reacted like that, they were preparing to take a fatal blow. The attorney moved closer to Reeves. "Mr. Reeves, what information do you have to provide the court about Officer Carter?" Daniel Reeves took a deep breath, then spoke in a steady voice. "I worked with Carter in the patrol unit for over 7 years. I know him well, and I know that what he said today is not true." He turned to look at the jury, then continued slowly. "I witnessed Carter using excessive force against people who presented no threat. I've seen him fabricate reports to justify his actions. He even forced me to lie in a similar case." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge banged his gavel, calling for order. But now, no one could hide their shock. Carter stood, his hands clenched into fists. "You're lying," he interrupted, his voice cracking. "You have no evidence." Daniel Reeves was unfazed. I have the old report, and I'm ready to submit it for review. He paused, his eyes sharpening. But more importantly, I have the truth. And this time, I'm not going to be silent. Monica was speechless. She didn't know this man, had never met him before, but she understood what he had just done. He wasn't here for her. He was here for his own conscience. Monica's lawyer looked straight at the jury. You heard me. Officer Carter has a past as unsavory as he describes. And if a man has twisted the truth once, who can say he won't do it again? The atmosphere changed. It was as if a curtain had been pulled back, revealing the naked truth behind it. Carter was still standing there, but he looked smaller than ever. Monica breathed a sigh of relief. She didn't have to fight alone anymore. And now, justice was beginning to tilt toward the truth. A hush fell over the courtroom after Daniel Reeves's shocking testimony. Carter, once so arrogant and confident, now looked like a cornered animal. But Monica was not done. She knew that even though the truth was beginning to come out, she still had to go all the way to destroy every lie Carter had concocted. Her attorney stood, his voice calm but commanding. Your Honor, the defendant Monica Jackson is no ordinary person. She is not the violent person Officer Carter describes her to be. In fact, she is one of the most elite warriors this country has ever produced. Monica stood. She stepped into the center of the courtroom so that everyone could see her. No longer just a woman accused of a false charge. No longer just a name. She took a deep breath, then spoke clear and proud. I am Monica Jackson. I serve in the United States military for over 20 years. I am a Navy SEAL. The room was silent. Some blinked, as if they couldn't believe their ears. The jury looked at each other. A few raised their eyebrows in surprise. Navy SEAL. Those two words were more than just a title. They were a symbol of discipline, of steel, of the most elite soldiers America had ever produced. Monica continued, her voice steady as an unstoppable stream. I've been on dozens of special operations missions around the world. I've faced situations where if I hadn't kept my cool, I wouldn't be standing here today. I've been in real combat situations where controlling my emotions could mean the difference between life and death. She turned to Carter, looking him straight in the eye. And you mean to tell the court that I, a person trained to handle the most stressful situations, lost control over a street check? A murmur of dismay began to rise. The jury seemed to be mulling over everything they had just heard from Carter. Monica's attorney nodded at her, then held up a stack of papers in front of the court. Your Honor, here is the defendant's military record. These certificates document her entire service, her Medal of Honor, her Special Operations certification, and her record of being a distinguished soldier. He placed the papers on the table, where the judge could see them clearly. This is not the record of a violent, uncontrolled individual. This is the record of a hero. There was a long silence. Monica could see the eyes of the jury change, from suspicion to respect. She knew they were realizing that Carter's story was not only illogical, but also an insult to those who had devoted their lives to protecting our country. Carter was still sitting there, but he no longer looked as arrogant as before. Now he looked like someone clinging to a sinking raft. Monica's attorney turned to the jury, his voice heavy. Now you know the truth. The only question left is, will you let a woman, a veteran, a hero, suffer a lie? Or will you stand up for justice? Monica looked around the courtroom. She didn't need to say anything more. She had said everything she needed to say. Now the truth had spoken, and justice could not be ignored. The atmosphere in the courtroom had changed. If Officer John Carter had maintained his arrogant confidence before, now it was broken. Monica's testimony, combined with the unexpected appearance of Daniel Reeves, had created a rift in Carter's story. But what no one expected was that the rift would quickly spread, right from within Carter himself. Across the room, a man in a police uniform sat in the witness box. His name was Mark Evans, a longtime police officer, a colleague of Carter's. Until then, he had stood by Carter, believing his colleague's story. But now, after everything he had just witnessed, something inside him was shaken. Evans glanced at Carter one last time, then slowly stepped onto the witness stand. He took a deep breath, his hands clenched on the railing, as if he were struggling with himself. Monica's attorney stepped forward, his voice soft but sharp. "Officer Evans, you worked with Officer Carter for many years. Can you tell the court what you know about him?" Evans was silent for a long moment. Carter stared at him, his eyes full of warning. But then, Evans sighed, as if letting go of a burden he had been carrying for so long. "Before I believed Carter," Evans said, slowly but surely, "I believed his testimony because I thought my teammates would never lie. But after hearing what Monica Jackson said, after seeing the evidence of Carter's past, I could no longer turn a blind eye." The courtroom fell silent. Betrayal within the ranks of the police was rare. But this was not just betrayal, it was standing up for justice. Evans looked straight at the jury, then continued, "I have seen Carter behave inappropriately in the past. I didn't want to believe it, but now I can't deny it. I have seen him twist reports to protect himself. I have seen him use unnecessary force against people who were defenseless. And today, as I sat there listening to him talk about Monica Jackson, I realized this is not the first time he has made things up." A tremor ran through the room. Carter shot up from his chair, his face red with anger. "What the hell are you doing, Mark?" he demanded, but there was a slight tremor in his voice. Evans didn't turn to look at him. He just continued, his voice firm, "I can't be silent anymore." Monica's attorney stepped forward, his eyes sharp. "Officer Evans, do you have any evidence to back up what you just said?" Evans nodded. "I have a copy of the old report where Carter changed his testimony to cover up a false arrest. I've kept it for years without saying anything. But today, I'm going to turn it over to the court." The room erupted. Several members of the jury exchanged glances, clearly having changed their view of the case. The judge motioned for Evans to submit his documents. Carter glared at Evans, but this time, his gaze was no longer that of a man in control. It was the gaze of a man slowly realizing that everything was falling apart around him. Monica sat still, watching it all. She didn't need to say another word. Justice had begun to speak for itself. And this time, there was no hiding the truth. The courtroom was filled with tension. After Mark Evans's testimony, the jury and the audience had lost their initial composure. Suspicion was growing, and now everyone realized that Officer Carter was not the upright man he had always appeared to be. But Monica knew that a single statement was not enough to bring down a man like Carter. She needed a stronger blow, an undeniable truth. Monica's attorney stepped forward, holding a thick file. "Your Honor," he said, his voice calm, but with an undeniable edge. "Today's testimony raises an important question. Was this Officer Carter's first abuse of power?" He paused, scanning the room, letting the question sink in. "The answer is no." A murmur broke out in the courtroom. The attorney opened the file, pulled out a few sheets of paper, and held them up. "We have investigated Officer Carter's past, and what we have found is alarming." He turned to the judge. "Your Honor, we are submitting the disciplinary reports and formal complaints that are on file with the police department. This is evidence that Officer Carter has a long history of using unnecessary force, especially against people of color and those who are defenseless." Monica watched Carter. She saw his body tense, his hands clenched white. He knew he was exposed. The attorney continued. "Over the past 5 years, there have been at least 7 formal complaints against Officer Carter for excessive force. However, all of them were dismissed before they could go any further." He stepped toward the jury table, his voice growing more serious. "Several of Carter's victims are ready to testify. They were never heard because of false reports and protections from the system. But now the truth must come out." A female juror frowned, clearly affected by what she was hearing. Another flipped through the documents handed to them, her eyes widening as she looked at the list of complaints. The attorney held up another sheet of paper. "This is a report from 3 years ago, when Officer Carter beat a homeless man to the point of hospitalization, simply because he refused to leave a park bench." He paused, letting his words sink in. "This is not an officer of justice. This is a violent man masquerading as a police officer." Carter jumped to his feet, almost shouting, "This is a conspiracy. They're trying to frame me." But no one was listening to him anymore. The jury no longer looked at him with trust, but with wariness and horror. The judge banged his gavel, calling for order. He looked at Carter with a stern gaze. Officer Carter, if the allegations against you are true, the court will order a formal investigation into your past conduct. That was the end. Monica looked straight at Carter, but this time she didn't see a powerful man standing before her. She saw a man crumbling under the weight of his own lies. She didn't need to fight anymore. Justice had begun to take its course. The hallway outside the courtroom was eerily silent. No more banging of the judge's gavel. No more arguments echoing through the air. Only the tense, heavy atmosphere of an approaching storm. Monica stepped out of the courtroom, taking a deep breath. The court had adjourned, but she knew this was not the end. Justice had begun to lean toward the truth, but people like Carter did not accept defeat easily. And just as she had predicted, Carter was standing there, right outside the door. His face was red with anger, his hands clenched so tightly that his knuckles were white. Monica did not stop, nor did she flinch. She looked straight at him, walking steadily as if she were still on a battlefield. Carter took a step forward, blocking her path. "You think you've won?" he said, his voice low but menacing. "You think the jury will side with you just because you have some lame excuse?" Monica didn't flinch. She just crossed her arms, her eyes cold. "No," she said, her voice so calm it took his breath away. "I think they'll side with the truth. And that's something you can't control." Carter laughed, a harsh, bitter laugh. He shook his head, but Monica could see the unease in his eyes. He was losing. He knew it. "Listen, Monica." Carter ground his teeth, his voice growing harsher. "You don't understand this game. I've been in this business long enough to know how to make things disappear. If you keep at it, I'll make your life hell. Do you think the courts can protect you forever?" Monica said nothing for a few seconds. She just looked at him calmly, as if sizing up an opponent on the battlefield. Then she took a step forward, so close that Carter could feel her powerful presence. "You know who I am, right?" Her voice was soft, but each word rang out clearly like a warning. "I've lived through real battles. I've stood in a line of fire, faced men 100 times more dangerous than you. I'm not easily intimidated." And most importantly, she tilted her head, her eyes never leaving his. "I'm not afraid of you." Carter swallowed. A long silence stretched between them. Monica could feel the anger tearing at him. He wanted to do something, to attack, to threaten, but he didn't dare. Because despite the uniform, despite the power in his hands, he knew one thing. He couldn't move her. Finally, he smiled faintly, but there was no confidence in his eyes. "Go ahead," he muttered, taking a step back. "But mark my words, this game isn't over." Monica didn't need to answer. She just looked at him, then turned and walked away. And in that moment, she knew that Carter had lost. Not just in the trial, but in the psychological warfare between them. Because people like him, when they can't instill fear, have nothing left. The truth will prevail, and Monica will be the last one standing. The courtroom was dead silent. All eyes were on the judge as he held up the jury's verdict. The tense moments stretched on for what seemed like an eternity. The only sound echoing in the air was the ticking of the clock. Monica sat up straight, not showing any signs of nervousness, but she could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She had fought, not just for herself, but for the truth. And now she would know if justice was truly on her side. The judge cleared his throat, then read aloud. "We, the jury, having considered all the evidence and testimony, find the defendant, Monica Jackson, not guilty." A ripple of excitement spread through the courtroom. Monica let out a long breath, not because she doubted the outcome, but because she knew this was a moment more important than any battle she had ever fought. On the other side, Officer John Carter sat stunned. His face was pale, his hands clenched so tightly that his knuckles were stiff. He knew he had lost, but the worst was yet to come. Monica's attorney stood up, looking directly at the judge. "Your Honor, given all the evidence of Officer Carter's history of misconduct, we request a formal investigation into his past conduct." The judge nodded. "Request granted. We will turn the entire file over to Internal Affairs." The murmuring broke out again. Carter stood up, barely able to control himself. "I did it all for the job," he shouted, But no one in the room believed his excuses anymore. Monica looked at him, her eyes calm but firm. "No, Carter, you did it all for yourself. And now it's over." Two officers stepped forward, placing their hands on Carter's shoulders. He struggled, but knew things had gotten out of hand. He was led from the courtroom, a symbol of a system rife with abuse, finally brought to light. As he disappeared, Monica closed her eyes for a moment. She had not only reclaimed her honor, but had also launched a larger fight, a fight against the injustice of the system that people like Carter had exploited. She walked out of the courtroom, where dozens of people were waiting. Some had supported her from the start, some had doubted her, but now their eyes had changed. Monica was more than just a woman who had won a trial. She had become a symbol of justice and resilience. A reporter approached, microphone raised. "Monica, what do you have to say after all that has happened?" She paused for a second, looking directly into the camera. "Justice doesn't exist on its own. We have to fight for it." She paused, her eyes sharp. "Today, I won, but there are thousands of others out there waiting for their own justice. And I will not stop here." The words lit a fire in the crowd. They began to clap, and then cheers broke out, not just for a woman who had just been found innocent, but for someone who had stood up to the system. Monica took a deep breath. Her fight wasn't over. It had only just begun.